Exploring the world below is a staple of fantasy realms. The idea of a whole civilization under the surface of a world is an attractive thought, and one which world builders often lean into. Gold hanging like ropes from the ceiling, rivers of lava flowing through caves. It all adds such an awesome element of fantasy to any given world. But how would such an environment affect the culture of a civilization? What would their art look like? What impact would living in the dark have on their religion? And what type of magic suits the dark realm best? Those are the questions I want to answer today. Welcome to another episode of Just in Time Worlds with your host, Marie Mullaney. Just before we get started, if you want to help me make more content and get some cool channel merch in the process, check out my store on Spring. You can get some great shirts like this one. You can get some mugs, some pint glasses, even some shoes and bags. So some sample products are tagged in this video, and there's a link to the full catalog in the description. Right, enough of that. Let's talk about underground culture, starting with art. Living underground would have a profound effect on the cultural and artistic expression of a given civilization. It's important to consider here if your people can see or not. And this is something that I discussed extensively in my first video in this series on underground civilizations, linked in the information card. If your species cannot see, they will not have some of the forms of arts that I discuss below, and will probably emphasize other forms of art like tactile or acoustic art. So with that in mind, let's talk about the various art forms that I think would really add something extra and magical to an underground civilization. First, let's hit the visual arts. There is, of course, cave murals. Now, we have painted on walls of caves since before we were the only human species on the planet. And if your species are sighted, chances are extremely strong that their underground caverns and tunnels are painted in rich murals. Everything from religious iconography, and we will talk about religion shortly, to maps or heroes or legends or creatures, all of these would grace the walls. On the other hand, if your people are not sighted, consider adding texture-based art to the walls. So, as they interact with the walls, either through their sense of touch or through something like whiskers or electroreceptors, they feel the art through these changes in texture and in the carvings on the wall. Now, of course, you can add this kind of interaction with the art even if your people are sighted. It could even embellish visual arts where you see one thing, but when you touch it, you feel another. And this could create a dictamine between what you see and what you feel, which can provide its own appreciation and be its own unique art form to your underground people. And speaking of embellishing paints, if you have bioluminescent light or chemiluminescent light via minerals, artists could create pieces that glow in the dark, even in different colors. They could have such light decorate parts of a painted mural, changing the picture as light shines on the walls. And speaking of minerals, don't get married to painting your walls. Artists might use different colored stones, gems, or crystals to create detailed mosaics on floors and walls and ceilings. I can definitely see tile making being its own art form, and mosaic patterns telling their own story of history. Even if your people are sighted, I think that auditory arts would have a key role to play in their cultural life, especially with the potential acoustics underground. Performance arts might rely heavily on the unique sound property of caves. Dramatic monologues, rhythmic chants, or musical performances could be designed to play off echoes, creating mesmerizing sonic experiences. In certain echo chambers, you might have a single sound roll around the wall for hours or even days on end. In David Eddings' world, in the world of the Belgariad, this is one of the things that stuck with me from the Ulgo caves. They had a choir of Ulgos that sang a hymn to the god Ul every hour on the hour. That sound echoed through the caverns. Then, when the choir sang again, the additional harmony interacted with the echoing harmony. I can imagine this being a haunting and beautiful sound that absolutely floods an underground city with a song of ages. So I would definitely think about sound as being a primary performative art. But in terms of performative arts, besides, of course, dancing and musical instruments, I can also see shadow plays being a core part of the culture. Since the light is easy to control underground, artists could tell stories using puppetry or actors behind screens. This could create plays with stunning silhouettes and dramatic effects. One of the disadvantages of shadow plays in the world above is that you need everything to be dark. But in the underground world, this becomes a key selling point of shadow plays. So that's the fine arts and the performative arts. But does the underground offer us more than that? Well, yes. An amazing art form you could add is interactive art. For example, artists might design chambers or corridors to manipulate echoes and sounds in a particular way. This could create unique soundscapes. Visitors could walk through and experience a dynamic soundscape as their footsteps and voices interact with the environment. So each visitor experiences the art differently depending on their voice, their footsteps, the instruments that they bring into the room, etc. And this could create a unique experience that could become a part of your religion or your culture. Or you could create art in 3D. Taking advantage of the maze-like nature of caves, artists could design intricate labyrinths that visitors can navigate, each turn and chamber offering a different artistic experience. Here, you could incorporate cave murals, textile carvings, or soundscapes, and, depending on the path you walk through the labyrinth, every time you experience the art, it changes. The path changes your experience of the art. I think that this would really create a unique form of interactive art to include in an underground civilization. The most important part of designing art for the underground world is to think about how it fits into the environment. Is there natural light? If yes, you probably have quite a bit of sight-driven art. Does your species have an expanded sense of touch or hearing? That will probably focus on tactile or auditory art. And don't forget about the inherently space-constrained nature of the underground realm, both in terms of using elements like labyrinths, as well as keeping art pieces small enough to fit into cave chambers and tunnels. And if you enjoyed this section on art, hit the thumbs up button, and let's talk about spirituality and religion. Religion is influenced by numerous factors, including the environment, history, external contacts, and collective experiences. Naturally, living underground is going to change a culture's experience of religion. First, let's talk about the kind of deities or spirits that these people would likely turn to, in my opinion. Now, bear in mind, I'm assuming that there's no actual fully divine and interfering God involved here. Obviously, if you have a God that regularly walks among the people or talks to them, well, that changes everything, right? So, what I'm talking about here is I'm talking either about a God or a spirit that doesn't interfere much, or one that isn't real but is still worshipped. Okay, so with that caveat out of the way, let's talk about deities and spirits. A primary god or goddess might personify the earth itself as the ultimate protector and provider of the people. This deity could be seen as a guardian who shields the inhabitants from the outside world and provides for their needs. This would almost be inevitable, right? There were many cultures who had a kind of Earth Mother worship, and that was with us living under the sky and having all the sky god cults as well. So imagine if you live below the surface, how much easier it would be to just turn to an earth worship. But maybe the earth is too vast. Maybe people are like, that's a little bit too big to worship. It might be that each cave or section of the underground might be believed to have its own spirit or guardian. These could be appeased or prayed to during excavations or journeys. This would hint more towards an animistic religion. And for my thoughts on animism, check out my video on the topic. I also think that ancestor worship could be a very common religion underground. The enclosed nature of the environment might well encourage the belief that after death, the ancestors still inhabit the stones themselves. I could very much see each family having an ancestral spirit, or maybe an object like the Roman lairs, where the ancestral spirits dwell within this spiritual object. So when someone dies, their spirit enters the death mask, or perhaps an urn, or a special kind of stone made out of a special ore, or something like that. And these items form both the grave of the person and the place of worship. Of course, if you do go this route, the creation of those ancestor-containing items would certainly be an art form in their own right. Now, of course, religion is not just about the focus of the religion, but also about the mythos of the people. One of the very important cosmological considerations is, what do they know about the world outside? If the inhabitants have been underground for countless generations, the surface and the sky might be part of their myths. It might be filled with both wonder and dread. Stories of a vast open space above them might sound as fantastical to them as tales of other dimensions do to us. Or perhaps there is no outside and they've never been outside. If all their generations have been contained underground, that would quite fundamentally alter their cosmology, as they would have no need for things like explaining stars or weather, but they would definitely need to explain things like lava, the world below, etc. Cosmology impacts creation myths quite dramatically. In my opinion, the creation myths of underground people would likely fall into one of two categories, most likely. One, people might believe that they were created or birthed from the very rock of the underground, sculpted by the hands of their deities. Basically, they were born underground, and they never lived on the surface. Or two, there could be myths about the ancestors retreating underground from above ground to escape some kind of cataclysm or persecution on the surface. So, they once lived in sunlight and air, but now they live in darkness because of some great event that their deity or guiding spirits or ancestors saved them from by leading them into the underground world. And for more of my thoughts on creation myth, check out my topic on the video in the information card. Of course, if you have a good creation myth, it's likely that you have a good end times myth. And like the creation myth, I could see it going one of two ways. Either at the end times, everyone's spirit rises to the surface, or conversely, everyone's spirit journeys deeper in toward the core. If you don't use ancestor worship, you might also use either the above world or the core world as your afterlife realm, if you have such a thing. In terms of morality taught by the religion, I think cooperation and respect for the earth would almost certainly be included in your morality. Given the environment where the roof could collapse on you at any time and where you have to dig through rocks to make new roads. I think this would pretty naturally arise in any underground culture unless they had magic or technology that could make them easily be able to handle anything the environment throws at them. Basically, this is a high pressure environment that would breed cooperation between the people and respect for said environment. Now, speaking of making places and things, when you're designing your underground religion, don't forget about sacred places, objects, and art. Some naturally formed or historically significant caves might be considered especially sacred, perhaps believed to be the first dwelling place of the ancestors, the place where they were born. Or maybe it was a place where the deity revealed themselves to the people. I can especially see this for things like the route to the sky world, freshwater springs, or caverns with unique features like stalactites or stalagmites, or certain kinds of rare minerals or echo planes. And for arts, if you have visual arts, your people could connect with the divine by etching sacred stories into the cave walls or depicting them in light or in mosaics. You could have shadow plays of the divine mythos or use the echoes to sing hymns. And don't forget about offerings in terms of the religion, especially in the dangerous work of excavations and tunneling. It might be required that offerings of incense, metals, or even living offerings like animals should be made to appease the earth and to ensure the safety of the workers during this dangerous activity. What you want to think about in terms of designing your religion is how the darkness and the enclosed environment has affected the way the people of this civilization think about the spiritual and philosophical aspects of life. Remember, they won't have weather gods and so on because the weather doesn't affect them as much as it does us. Think about the things that do affect them: the earth, quakes, light, the world of sound, lava, those kinds of things. What in their environment really controls their lives, especially at the start of their civilization period, and then build your religion from that point outward. Is it the earth shaking? Is it lava exploding? Is it flooding in the tunnels? Whatever it is, that's probably your most powerful god, your Zeus, your Jupiter, your Deus. And then you can build up the rest of your gods and your church around that central concept. And for more on my ideas around building a church, check out my video on that topic. In the meantime, if you are getting value from this video, consider giving it a super thanks, and let's turn to the all-important fantasy topic, magic. Let's get the most obvious one out of the way. The absolutely most fitting magic is obviously earth manipulation. Moving rocks would probably be your most basic form of this. Building up from there, you could have skilled magicians that are actually able to shape rocks into all kinds. They might even be able to terraform whole caverns and create homes for people out of stone. They could create sculptures, functional tools, or, as I say, whole living spaces. But you don't have to go full-scale earthbender. Even just being able to detect the earth types, to sense if there are minerals in the rocks, to know if a cavern is stable, all of that would be incredibly valuable to an underground people. And this kind of earth manipulation could also be used for communication. You could have your earth mages send messages by manipulating drum beats that travel through the earth or that travel along in the echoes, if you can manipulate the earth. I definitely consider this an extremely appropriate magic for the underground world. But of course, if you do have earth manipulation, this might be part of a larger elemental magic system. I could absolutely see elemental magic being critical underground. I spoke in the first video about the importance of airflow and water. And if you have elemental magic, air and water magic could both help with that. And of course, if you have elemental magic and fire magic, that could give you light in the dark caverns. And speaking of light, another absolutely fitting form of magic is anything that gives people low light or no light vision. Perhaps something like thermal vision or night vision, or the ability to create items that hold the light, or the ability to straight up create light. All of those would be both fitting and useful. Just one caveat, don't forget to build in some limitations on the light. You don't want to completely lose the sense of being in the underworld by having the place lit up as bright as day all the time. Now, bearing in mind that cave-ins and blind rooms with no entries could happen, I think portal magic or some kind of move through the earth magic would also be really useful in an underworld. Short distance portals could be used for skipping through walls or for getting around cave-ins and so on. Long distance portals, obviously rarer and more powerful, could connect your underground cities, removing the need for building very expensive tunnels through the earth. I also do like to think about my power sources of magic for underground realms, and there are two that I specifically want to talk about in this area. The first is using geothermal energy as a power source. I think that this could be a great source for elemental magic, especially. If you think about the heat rising from the earth and all of that energy contained within, I think that this could be a really thematically appropriate power source for your magic. The second thing I'd like to talk about is crystals. This doesn't even need to be a power source. It could be an amplifier and conduit or a container. Crystals would be pretty abundant underground, and it could add a lot to your magic system to have them used as containers for magic or as the raw material of magic, or potentially as the only thing that can be shaped into a magic item. If you use this as the basis for your magic items, you could have crystal swords, rings, crowns, all manner of really cool stuff that adds a unique flair to your underground magical items. Of course, all of this is the barest, most cursory overview of magic. All the other forms of magic I've spoken about can also work underground, with the exception potentially of weather magic. If you're interested in checking out all of my ramblings on magic, there's a playlist over there with them all collected together. Everything from elemental magic to alchemy to druids, etc. The key for me with underground magic, as with any magic, is to embed the magic within your culture, to make sure that it fits both the environment and the culture, that it's not just a standalone thing that kind of feels as though it's pasted on as an afterthought to give the place a fantastical flair. Really work your magic into your culture and your environment. And this concludes my series on building underground civilizations and underground cultures. Did you enjoy it? Let me know in the comments what you thought and if there are other environmental type civilizations that you would like me to cover. If you want to say thanks for this video, super thanks is enabled, or you could become a channel member and get early access to my videos along with other cool perks. If you enjoyed this video, check out my video on fantastical physiology and its effects on culture. It really does help the algorithm if you click on those end game videos. It makes the algorithm think that my channel is well loved. And if you watch videos to the end and give me that view time. And I will see you soon for another video from Just in Time Worlds. Go on, go click that physiology video. I'm just hanging around here for a second to give you a chance to click.